Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I'll get to part 12. I started it, a couple of voiceovers, but like I said, I'm going to be doing probably less videos for some period of time. I took a day off yesterday, and anyways, so there'll be I'll be working my way through the Journey series, part 12 in the next couple of days. But there's been some JoJo Magoo developments and some other things, just headlines that are, things I just want to get to in a brief video here. I want to start off with one of my viewers sent me this. It's from the movie Lions for Lambs or Lambs for Lions. And, it's just another nail in the coffin of the disastrous war in Iraq. So this is a movie that came out in 2007. Barack Obama was going to be elected in 2008, so him and JoJo Magoo were running for president and vice president at that time. And so this was common knowledge, or at least knowledge that Hollywood had, that in retrospect we see. Let's get to the clip here.
So leave.
That's not an option?
By leave, he's talking about leaving Afghanistan, right? So that's I guess, important setup to this clip.
Okay, let's play this out. We walk, and Afghanistan reverts back to the Taliban. Only now the Taliban has metastasized into something infinitely more vicious and potent because they're now 2-0 versus superpowers.
The big giant colossal cursor got carried away in this clip for some reason. Anyways, but that's a point that I don't think anybody thought of. I certainly didn't. And of course, they're not 2-0 because they just outlasted Russia and America. But I talked about how it shows, Vietnam showed the template of how you defeat the American military, right? It's now out there. You just have these, you don't have an army against an army. You have an army against, guerrilla warfare, and they just have to outlast you, right?
They butcher the people who helped us, who voted, who were stupid enough to put their faith in our word. So call it not only the end of hope for tens of millions of Afghans, but the end of American credibility, the end of America as a force for righteousness in the world.
So even in this crappy movie, this movie was, Robert Redford was in as well, so it had like a lot of star power, especially for the time, and it bombed at the box office. I don't remember what his plan was, right? But this clip is very telling because they knew, like Hollywood knew, right? This is exactly what ended up happening. And they left out the part of $88 billion in weapons and training that was left behind for the Taliban. So they're even, Mr. Taliban is even, better off.
When did America
And when we're forced to go back in a couple of years, and please quote me on this, we'll be squared off against a shattered Iraq, a hopeless Afghanistan, and a nuclear Iran. How many troops are we going to need then? I guarantee you'll be adding some zeros.
See, once you make a mistake as a nation, when you make a global mistake, a mistake that, especially a war, like when you make a mistake in terms of a war, and it was a mistake for them, but it was, a lie for all of us, right? And the thing's unwinnable. You can't come out without, some embarrassment and some whatever it is, right? Consequences. Like all these wars that happen and these, these Arab Spring wars in Iraq and all these things, Afghanistan. And so when the lies start coming out, then what are you going to do? Like, no president wants to be the guy who lost it, right? And it just, the politics kicks in. And we saw this, I've been covering this since, this debacle of a withdrawal happened, right? But it was really the beginning that was the problem.
Wait, may I speak freely?
So Meryl Streep ends up playing like a real reporter there and asking some real questions. She gets into the military-industrial complex. I don't think I've ever made it through that movie. It's kind of a god-awful movie. But what you've seen is that they knew, right? Hollywood knew. All the things that we know now that have transpired was predicted there by Hollywood. So this was, inevitable. And so the turning on JoJo Magoo, I want to cover this because there's more information that's coming out. We'll start here with Saturday Night Live. They've switched to a new Magoo. And, let's just watch a little bit of this.
How's everybody's doing? What's cooking? What's good? How you doing? How's everybody's summer? Mine was bad.
So the way he said bad is, it's maybe a slightly better impression than some of the other ones. Doesn't look like him. I mean, Kyle Doonigan's, whatever show he has going on, his impressions of JoJo Magoo are not only like more accurate, but they're funny, right? Light in a way that, if you want some good Magoo comedy, you can check out his channel. But he's just some independent person. Saturday Night Live is this conglomerate. Key and Peele, they have some good, some great sketches. Some of it's like kind of a hit and miss with them. Some of them are, belly laugh funny. But, you look at like sketch comedy, and Saturday Night Live has never really been good. Like I remembered it being better than it was because it was kind of new what they were doing. When I was in high school, Saturday Night Live was like it was its first season. And so, and it's just gotten worse and worse. And now it's just a joke, right? But this is their, in-depth truth to power take on JoJo Magoo.
Not Cuomo bad, but definitely not Afghanistan good. Everyone keeps razzing me about that drone strike.
So, it's not something they should make light of, right?
But on the bright side, I went the entire summer without falling down the stairs once.
So they've kind of turned on him a little bit, right? Because they don't have Trump anymore. Alec Baldwin, his crappy Trump impression. It's not funny, and it's not good. It's not truth. There's nothing really redeemable about this. But it shows you that JoJo Magoo is now, not getting he's the hero, the star power, Jim Carrey playing him. I mean, all the things that they've, done with him in terms of comparing him to Trump. They're now, giving it to him a little bit, right? And, slightly, not the way it should be, but in terms of reversing their presentation of an attitude towards him, because that's happening all around, because even more telling is this article. So this is an article from MSNBC. A federal government shutdown looms. Why Biden is struggling to get his house in order. The political danger to Biden with Trump out of the way was apparent the morning after the 2020 election. Joe Biden won the White House mainly because of who he was not. Now, after 10 months in office, voters are expecting the president to stand on his own and are increasingly dissatisfied with what they're seeing. Many voters thought Biden and a unified Democratic control of the federal government's elected branches would bring back normalcy. Instead, they have been struggling to keep the government open, extend the debt ceiling in order to avoid default, and rack up basic legislative accomplishments. The scramble ahead of Thursday's deadline to broker a stopgap deal to prevent a partial government shutdown, while Biden's centerpiece infrastructure deal hung in the balance between warring Democratic functions. Now we'll get into this little clip here, but this is stuff I've been saying forever, right? This is one of the sort of core aspects of my just let it happen, thing I used to do. That'll come back around, I guess, at some point. But what I said is Republicans should just withdraw. Trump should disappear, and they should just withdraw and let the Democrats cannibalize themselves. Because it would happen, like I said, this with all these movements. They put together these movements, right, that are, political parties. They put together, coalitions of demographics that don't work together, right? So in the Democratic Party, they have demographics that are competing with each other. And they have the moderate Democrats who are very business-oriented, and they have the, very liberal Democrats who, feel cheated and feel like they're carrying the party, and yet they don't ever get, the deals they want. And their deals that they're asking for are crazy. Like they want $3 trillion for liberal bailouts and things like that. But anyways, the Democrats don't get along. They don't get along with anybody. The cancel culture thing, it's going to cannibalize and turn on everybody like it's doing with the Cuomo brothers. They don't have heroes for long. And without a unified hatred towards Trump and the Republicans, they have nothing. That's why I said just let it happen. Just let them, and the people will get so sick of them so quickly. The agenda would fail and there'll be a complete about face in America. I mean, that's all you have to do is let them, go to town on each other. I mean, look at even like the LBGTQ. I've talked about this before. It's a group of, different peoples, right? And they all have a different perception of the world, and they're not the same, but they've come together to form a, coalition, a strong coalition, right? But you have different types of demographics that come together that when they're left on their own, when there's no longer an enemy to fight, there's no longer a joint war to go against something, right? Which was Trump, then they were doomed to fall apart. I said this all along. Like once Trump disappears, they won't be able to keep this thing afloat because, there's no money left. This is all bad news. There's no fixing this. Just like with Make America Great Again. There was no Make America Great Again. That wasn't an option. That's not a possibility. That's not something that can happen in reality. And so Trump was doomed because he was promising something, going back to a time period that could never be recreated, and it wasn't truthful in the first place, right? And so you have that now with JoJo Magoo, where anything you build back better, I mean, there's no, these are just slogans. It can't happen. And so eventually, if they go with the liberal agenda, America will turn on them in a, heartbeat. Like I get this stupid, people send me memes like this. Someone sent me something about how this is about communism. I mean, that's just a word they use to get the right on board with something, get the right to get angry and things like this. There's no communism. This isn't about communism. This isn't about any of those things. It's about an economy, an economic system that's failing and them taking away resources from people that are promised that they can't deliver on. All of your wealth is promised, right? Your money that you possess, your wealth, the value that you have as a person is promised to you. It's not real. Like the dollar bill is a promise that it's worth $1. The government promises to pay. And now they have all these promises, Social Security, Medicaid, all these things out there that they can't, they can't make good on. So they have to take it away from people or do whatever they have to do. I mean, it's desperate times. And so JoJo Magoo isn't a very likable person. He never would have won presidency if he wasn't running against Trump and they didn't, manufacture this. I mean, Bernie Sanders was going to win the nomination if they didn't intervene, right? And that would have been a disaster because the liberal agenda for them would have been, something the American people would have rebelled against. There's no way Bernie Sanders would have won in the general election. If he did, it would be even worse for them. Like, people don't like this liberal agenda. Even liberals, real liberals, are bailing on it, right? They realize that it's not, it's something else, right? It's like, they're wearing, the controllers are wearing like a liberal bodysuit. Or you remember that first Men in Black movie when that one farmer guy was like, he was an alien and somebody the alien put on his skin to pretend that it was him, right? And that's what's happening. The liberal stuff is just a mask for this, dealing with the debt-based economy collapsing and pushing out a new deal that no one's going to like.
The intrigue on Capitol Hill. How will Democrats unite to pass two key pieces of President Biden's domestic agenda? Willie.
Yeah, this vote on the infrastructure bill is supposed to be tomorrow, but it looks a long way off from here. The president...
So this was a couple of days ago, and I watched something on CNN, and they had these two moderate Dems that are out there that don't want to vote with it. And they were, this one woman was talking about, I think she's from Arizona, and she was talking about how they made too many promises to both sides, right? They promised whatever they had to promise to these factions, these divisive factions in the Democratic Party. And now they can't keep all those promises, and people are going to be pissed. And then if they do pass a $3 trillion bailout with some of the, things that they want to do, American people, especially the independents, are going to be pissed, right? I mean, it's going to be the end of it. No matter what they do here, it's, they're screwed. I mean, it's just, there's no way to reinvent a failed policy to a system that's collapsing anyway. All right, so I went back and this is her name, Kristen Cinema, who is a Democrat from Arizona, but she's somewhat conservative. And I'm going to go back to Saturday Night Live because it's just more suckery from them. But first, let's watch this little clip.
The Arizona centrist argued, quote, require trust. Sinema said in a statement, quote, over the course of this year, Democratic leaders have made conflicting promises that could not all be kept and have at times pretended that differences of opinion within our party did not exist, even when those disagreements were repeatedly made clear, directly, and publicly. Sinema continued, quote, canceling the infrastructure vote further erodes that trust.
So she was saying they made conflicting promises, right? Which we all know they did. I said this a long time ago. They couldn't keep both sides happy. They could, rally against Trump, but they couldn't keep both sides happy. So I didn't find the CNN clip about her saying this, and then they had Joe Biden saying that they just needed two senators, Manchin and Sinema. Let's go back to Saturday Night Live here.
What do I want from this bill?
And so, this this actress is constantly, playing these right-wing parts.
I'll never tell, because I didn't come to Congress to make friends. And so far, mission accomplished.
Doesn't sound like her, doesn't look like her. And just no jokes there, right? There's JoJo Magoo, like not even, just another fail. Their life sucks so bad. And we'll go back there in a second, but this guy, in defense of Senator Sinema and Manchin. Cinema's an interesting, cinema, because it is cinema, everything we're watching here.
The issue has gone away. Our national debt is currently $28.8 trillion. That's over $86,000 for every single person in America. From our first president, George Washington.
So they're not really covering this, right? And this is the first time I've seen them talk about the national debt at all. And so he's saying it's $86,000 per person for $28 trillion. But it's not $28 trillion because they haven't added the bailout money in yet. I mean, the actual debt is $80 trillion, and that's not talking about derivatives. And then when they're talking about things that are promised, they don't have money, there's another $150 trillion of unpaid for, unaccounted for future liabilities, which is like Social Security and Medicaid, where they've promised to pay all this money out, right? So we're talking about $250 trillion, in debt. And we only the IRS only brings in $3 trillion or $3.5 trillion in income tax every year. And so how are you going to, the Democrats want to put another $3 trillion in all this sort of progressive bailout stuff. And it just doesn't add up.
Debt is currently $28.8 trillion. That's over $86,000 for every single person in America. From our first president, George Washington, until our 42nd, Bill Clinton, a span of 211 years, the United States accumulated $5 trillion of national debt.
And so, but a lot of this came during the Clinton-Bush, the wars that were going on there, era. Like they're making it sound like this was, the majority of it was happening under Clinton. But this was still payable. Like we could, conceivably pay this back, but it would have been hard.
During the administration of President George W. Bush, the national debt grew from 5 to 11 trillion.
Money was worth more then. Inflation has kicked in, right? And I've covered this. I mean, it's interesting CNN's finally getting around to this, but they're not saying what I'm saying. Like when you were talking about doubling 5 trillion to 10 trillion, then 11 trillion, to almost 12 trillion here, really. This is almost 6 trillion. And so you're looking at doubling, so, $1 trillion, it's hard to even conceive of that, right? It's $1,000 billion. It's $1 million right? And what we're talking about is quadrillions of dollars of debt here. It's just too much to even conceive of, like in the human mind, what a trillion is. It's a trillion of something is. What a quadrillion of something is. And so this is where it became, well, we're just screwed. We're just going to loot this country. And that's what Bush and Cheney and all those guys oversaw here. And then, then it was just like, everyone who gained control said, we're going to, see who we're going to pay off with this imaginary wealth as we run America into the ground and loot the crap out of its wealth and whatever.
National debt grew from 5 to 11 trillion. Then under President Barack Obama, the national debt jumped from 11 trillion to 20 trillion. And in the one
almost double in there, right? And then here's Trump.
Term of President Donald Trump, the national debt grew from 20 trillion to nearly 28 trillion.
And that doesn't include Trump's bailout. They haven't factored in the COVID bailouts yet. They're not even, they haven't put that on the books yet. And so that's another at least 6 trillion between Trump and JoJo Magoo.
No wonder then that the Wall Street Journal said Democrats may be angry, but as the days go by, they may recognize that Mr. Manchin is doing them a favor. With President Biden abdicating to the left, the West Virginian is providing a reality check on progressive excess.
But anyways, it's $28 trillion, right? And then you're going to add another 6 or 8 or whatever it is in terms of the bailouts for COVID. And so it's really going to be 12 at the end of the thing, right? And if you factor in all the things they're doing here, it could be as much as 16. So we're talking about increasing this to $40 trillion when we only have $3 trillion or even $4 trillion of tax revenues. It's already paid for, right? That's not going to the debt because the $4 trillion of tax revenue, it's only going to be 3.5, right? Our tax revenues vary per year. So it's, around 3.5, 3.2, whatever it is, trillion dollars, which is a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to the debt. And so they're saying tax the rich, but that's not going to bring it up in any significant way. And when you add new taxes, especially to wealthy people and corporate taxes, that makes the business, world tank, right? The economy tanks. But either way, let's say that tax revenue was $4 trillion, which it's not going to be. If somehow they were able to get more taxes in a year that we, closed down because of COVID. And so let's say it was $4 trillion. The budget is more than that. Our yearly expenses, our yearly nut is more than that. So we're not even paying off on our debts and our credit cards. There's nothing we're doing to pay any of it back, right? So if you're an individual person, and let's say again that the yearly income was $4 trillion, and we know that the debt, which is a lot more than 28, but let's say it's 28. That's 8 times. Your debt is 8 times your income, right? And if you didn't pay anything on that, if you're just accumulating more interest, you're not even paying off the interest, and so all that's accumulating. Then there's these big ticket items and the spending that Biden wants to do. It's there's no way, right? So it's already really up to $40 trillion. And so that's 10 times your income. But then you factor in, you double that with the real total amount of debt in America, which is $80 trillion. And like I said, the unpaid liabilities is another $120 trillion for Social Security and all that stuff that's promised but isn't accounted for yet. And so it's there's no way. You're not going to pay that back on $4 trillion a year. That's your salary. And you got $250 trillion worth of debt, not including the derivatives market, which is a devaluation of the currency and all the rest of it.
States Joe Manchin from West Virginia.
Yeah, that's right.
So again, this is whatever her name is, Addie something or other. She has a very high voice, but they keep on casting her as a man. It's just this weird thing they're doing. She's, their impressions are bad enough as it is, but her voice isn't doesn't look like the guy, right? And they're, this Joe Manchin guy who's talking about debt, and they're, kind of emasculating him here.
I'm a Democrat from West Virginia. If I vote for electric cars, they're going to kill me.
That's a good joke, right? I mean, think about how horrible this is, given the old Joe Biden one wink here.
And on the other side, we have 2 members of the Progressive Caucus, Ilhan Omar from Minnesota.
For those of you who don't know me, I was designed in a lab to give Tucker Carlson a heart attack.
Again, not funny and not accurate, right?
I wore a dress that said tax the rich, then spent all night partying with the rich. Oops.
So look at this, right? This horrible cast of characters and show. Just a and complete embarrassment to comedy. You know, they have all this material here and just it's just really bad. I mean, it's like, it's an embarrassment to America as well. And going back to this original article here, which I've been saying I don't know how long ago, like when the election first started, that JoJo wasn't somebody who could win or inspire people. He wasn't a great man. He wasn't a great Democrat. He wasn't, as good as Bill Clinton or Barack Obama and I'm not talking about his policies or his character. I'm talking about his, brand, his presentation as a potential leader. You wouldn't cast Joe Biden as a president that saved the world. You wouldn't put him on Mount Rushmore, right? He'd never had those kind of potential. He was just a run-of-the-mill politician with character issues, and he was a gaffe magnet, a groper, a snoozler, and all these things. And so they picked him for whatever reason out of a sea of horrible Democratic possible candidates. And they thought he was the best guy that they could sort of manipulate into beating Trump. I don't know what it was. I mean, again, with all of the system being somewhat rigged or whatever it is. So I don't, can't even comment on that. But they picked Joe Biden for a reason. Bernie Sanders beat him, would have beaten him. Bernie Sanders was far more popular and was winning, the primary when they contrived. I mean, the Democratic leadership came out and said, there's no way we're going to have Bernie Sanders as our representative because the guy was a progressive and he couldn't beat anybody. America doesn't want these progressive policies, the majority of them. And so they ran JoJo Magoo as a moderate with him promising the progressives things that he couldn't deliver. Or if he did, it would ruin not only the country, but it would ruin JoJo Magoo as well. Like, there's just so much debt you can accumulate before other countries and the world says that's enough, right? And we're already past that point. And so what they're doing is just looting the rest of the money away from people. They're trying to extract wealth from the upper class, and like not the upper class, but the upper middle class, right? People who will make, some hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. They want to, erase, bring everybody down to the level of poor and dependent on the beast. And again, there's going to be other things that come into play, go into my my series on the journey and some of these prophecies and things that we see happening on a global level in terms of war and whatever these big time upheavals are. And so all those things are mixing together. The people that run the system are trying to, reboot the system in a way where they retain their power and they can extract resources and depopulate the planet and all the rest of it. So there's a whole other stuff that I'm not talking about here. I'm talking about JoJo Magoo, and what I said was eventually going to happen with the Just Let It Happen was that when Trump disappeared, they were going to have this coalition that was at each other's throats, right? That never really worked together. Moderate Democrats and so-called liberal progressive Democrats. They're not the same in any way, but they are brought together with a common enemy and with promises made to both sides. And so this is, again, a just let it happen dream because they don't have a solution. They can't solve any of these problems. The Make America Great Again wasn't going to work. Build Back Better isn't going to work. America's done. And so now they're finally admitting it. Then you have CNN talking about the debt for the first time. And, I don't watch everything on CNN, but no one wants to talk about the debt. They don't even campaign on the debt. None of the candidates are allowed to talk about the debt as a campaign issue, right? We're, $9 trillion of debt being accumulated when we only have $3 trillion worth of income, on a yearly basis the debt is just going up and up and up, right? And that's with interest because the debt grows on its own without overspending. And so, all these are the reasons why I always talk about there's no fixing this system. There's the moral depravity that's the worst thing. The stuff I talk about with the heartfulness system, connecting to God internally and all those things. And so, now the mainstream media is finally, SNL is, beginning to cover JoJo Magoo as, a complete buffoon, which he is. And, they do a crappy job. But even in CNN, these other mainstream media, outlets are talking about JoJo Magoo as he really is. And so, you know, I don't really have to go on here. I got more, you know, important things to do. But we all see now that the mainstream media is finally validating things that I said, and I'm sure other people in the truth community have said. I mean, these are all things I've been saying all along. And now they're like, yeah, this is the case. JoJo Magoo was never a hero, never could do it. And now we're just going to acknowledge his incompetence after forcing him on the American people. I mean, that's how bad they suck. And I'm talking about the media and the Democratic Party and the, you know, Saturday Night Live, the comedians and celebrity culture are finally admitting what we all knew, that JoJo Magoo isn't up to the job. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.